أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم واعتصموا بحبل الله جميعا ولا تفرقوا واذكروا نعمة الله عليكم إذ كنتم أعداء فألف بين قلوبكم فأصبحتم بنعمته إخوانا وكنتم على شفا حفرة من النار فأنقذكم منها كذلك يبين الله لكم آياته لعلكم تهتدون. We're going to start from ayah number 103, inshallah, Surah AleImran, continuing where we left from last time. Allah Azza wa Jal says to hold tightly to the rope of Allah, one and all, meaning all of you together should hold on tightly to the cable or rope of Allah and do not become disunited, do not split yourselves apart, and remember well the great blessing of Allah upon you when you were indeed enemies, but then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala united your hearts and you became, by His mercy and blessing, brothers. And you used to be in a pit of hell. You used to be in the pit, in the depth of a pit of hell. And then Allah saved you from it. He extracted you from it. And like that, Allah will explain to you His signs so that you will be guided. So we have a couple of concepts here that are important to understand and will lead us to the next ayah. وَلْتَكُمْ مِنْكُمْ أُمَّةٍ يَدَعُونَ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ. That there must be a group amongst you who calls towards the good. So those concepts are, first of all, the words that are used and what they imply. Of course, that's what tafsir is all about. That the order of Allah to hold on fast, all of you, one and all, to the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What exactly is this rope? Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala anhu said it's the Quran. Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhuma said it is the jama'ah, it is the group. It is, in other words, to stick with the larger body of Muslims and to stick with those who are united and those who are in a group, in a jama'ah. Because jama'ah literally means, it's just literally a group. In Arabic, technically speaking, any group of 3 people or more is considered jama'ah. This is the plural, even in the Arabic language, the plural form is 3 or more people. Also, this interpretation that Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhuma has given, that the habl, the rope that we must grasp onto firmly, is the group, is the larger body of believers, is also supported by another riwayah of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala anhu, whom I previously mentioned that the habl here is the Quran, but he had also said something similar to Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, which is that it is the group, is the jama'ah. In actuality, this all has relationships to one another, because in the next ayah we see that the ummatun yad'una ila al-khair wa ya'muruna bil ma'ruf, that the ummah, or the group of people that must call towards the good and enjoin call towards the good and enjoin that which is ma'ruf. It has a connection, all of these words and these concepts, because what is ma'ruf is whatever the sharia and whatever the aql, whatever the sound, rational mind concludes to be good, if you will, concludes to be good, then that is what we are enjoined upon to call others towards. Why is it related? Because there's concepts here, and all of it in some way or in some form is explained in our deen, to not leave any ambiguity and to make things very clear for us, and also to have us understand and appreciate what it is to know and exemplify the good, or the ma'ruf. So what I mean by that is that the jama'ah, for instance, gives us a concept of not just unity, but it gives us the concept of having a group, meaning a majority, meaning a large group, meaning more than one person or 2 people, but 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way up to thousands. Why is that important? it's related to many concepts that we have in the ulum, or the sciences of the Sharia and of Deen. And to be honest with you, it also relates to the concepts that we talked about many times, which is regarded as part of our epistemology. How do we know as humans, period, not just Muslims, but even just human beings? How do we know certain things? How do we conclude certain things? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us guidance, and He gives us hidayah, and He explains things to us so that it is very clear. This is why Allamuhun Bayan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us this ability to explain things with clarity, so there's no confusion or no doubt. And why is this related? Why am I going on? Because jama'ah, that the idea of a group, it gives us a sense of security, not just in having large numbers. That's not the point here. In that, for instance, in our concept of things like tawatur, as I explained in other classes, that such a large number of people have reported an incident or have given us information regarding that incident, that it is impossible for us to have concluded any intuitively, and it is impossible for us to think or conclude that they have lied about the incident or they've made something up. So the concept here is that in the group, in every way, there's security. When a group witnesses an event or see something happening in front of their eyes, and such a large number of people see it, and such a large number of people report it, it won't really matter the differences of opinions that people have, the politics, the ahwa, meaning the personal, if you will, inclinations of people. It won't change the fact that they all saw one and the same thing. I hope that's clear. When we, let's say, if we all witness something happening, it really doesn't matter at that point in time our personal opinions or our personal inclinations. We all saw one and the same thing. So therefore, if we all report and we all agree and we all of what we report about it, all agrees, it shows that it's something that, again, it gives us certainty. This is not something that somebody has given us information based on their own opinion or their own desires or their own inclinations. This is something that a large group of people have delivered to us in such a way that we are certain that no way they can conclude upon or bring about something that is not true. Why is that important? Because it's related to what is ma'ruf. See, things that are good, you can only establish what is good and bad on some type of knowledge or evidence that cannot be disputed. Otherwise, if we are following our desires, this is why the people of bid'ah, those who just basically, bid'ah literally means to bring something about that's not been there, that it wasn't there before. It's to innovate. That's why the word al-bid'ah, samawati wal ard. Allah is the one who had literally brought the heavens and the earth from nothing. Right? So the word bada' is to bring something about that wasn't previously there before. So the idea of bid'ah is that a person may conclude something without any real knowledge of the subject or any really real knowledge at all. They're just simply following their desires. So they conclude or they bring something up out of their own inclinations, and there's no evidence for this whatsoever. They just simply feel that something should be a certain way, or they simply feel that something is good or that something is wrong or immoral, right? And in that case, what we will see is, because we see here also unity is mentioned, that we should not la tafarraqu, that we should not divide ourselves, which some has said la takhtalifu kama ikhtalafa ahlul kitab, that do not become divided, do not differ with each other the way that the Ahlul Kitab had differed with one another. And that's an important thing to remember, because Ahlul Kitab, what had made them different are not subsidiary issues of fiqh, for instance, all right, of law per se. The primary differences you find between Ahlul Kitab that makes them into different groups. Like, for instance, in the Christian religion, different denominations or churches, is their i'tiqad. It has to do with their beliefs. It has to do with what they say is Christianity at its core, not law per se, but its core, meaning its creed. So, for instance, early differences in Christian churches would be of things like, for instance, the divine nature of Isa alayhi salam, which we know is not true, but that would be one of their arguments. Even crucifixion, and then later on the Trinity. So those are key points of aqidah, or their creed and their beliefs. These are not points of law, and I want you to kind of hone in on that for a second. Because here we're told that the group must be adhered to, the Quran must be adhered to. And if you look at both of these things, they both have something in common, meaning the Quran also as a text, even as something that is relayed to us, matlu. It has been recited from the time of the Prophet ﷺ until now. It is recited and relayed to us in a way that it is mutawatir. And I hope you know this term by now, so I don't have to keep on repeating its meaning. Okay. In the same way, the Jama'ah, the majority, it fits the same description. It is the practice of the deen that has reached us through the majority, okay? Not through, not through a individual or through a small group of apparent views, but through the majority, okay? And that gives us the sense, again, that it's not just a matter of flag waving and slogans, like it's all great to see the Muslims together and celebrating Eid on the same day. That's not the point here. The point is that their deen, their way, is premised upon the strongest types of principles, and those principles and that aqidah and what they believe is to be premised upon the strongest types of evidence, because it should give them absolute certainty that what they're doing is right, absolute certainty what they're saying is true, absolute certainty that what they're saying is a true representative of what the Prophet ﷺ was given by Allah Azza wa Jal. And that is why we have to stick to the group. There has been many hadith where the Prophet ﷺ has said in many different ways that, as an example, the Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said, "Man faraq al-jama'ata قيد الشبر فقد خلع ربقة الإسلام من عنقه." أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. That whoever abandons the majority for even as much as if you would say like قيد الشبر, shibr is like a span. I can't remember the exact measurement right now, how quantifiably how much that is, but literally it's just a small amount of space. So whoever removes themselves from the majority even a little bit, then that person has literally removed the raqba. Is literally, it's like a chain, but what's here means it is that which binds you towards Islam. So the meaning of the hadith to the nearest extent is that whoever removes themselves even a little bit from the majority will have then removed Islam from their neck, meaning that which would keep them protected from going astray, that is now removed from them. So if their concepts and if their practice is not based on what was given to us through the majority, then they are in danger, okay, of being removed from that protection of Islam. So in other words, the true guidance that was given to us by Allah through His Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and was handed down to us generation by generation and safeguarded. So in a way that has never happened to any other nation before us. Okay, not only did they divide themselves in terms of their core belief systems, okay, their divisions are not just simply like a matter of fiqh, like we do or don't do things a certain way. They are very essential divisions of core belief systems, and none of them accept each other as a true representative of Christianity, as an example. All of them will say that our church is the actual and true church that God has approved, and that is the true understanding of what Isa alayhi salam brought. Okay, how would we know that? It's very simple. You follow the majority. You go where you have the most safety. And even from, like I'm saying, even from an intellectual academic point of view, what is mutawatir, what is related by the majority, is always going to be and always will be the most sound way of understanding an event, period. So if you want to know what are the true teachings of Islam, it's a very simple solution. Follow the jama'ah. وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا. Follow the majority, okay? Because in that there is safety, in that there is guidance. If you don't, if you go away from the majority based on usually what has happened, this is why they say that, later on what is ma'ruf is something that the Sharia has said clearly. And this is the important thing. When we talk about the Sharia, there's a science there too. And when we talk about the evidence of the Sharia, what most of us know is the Quran, the Sunnah, Ijma, and Qiyas. And each one of these categories also can be broken down in different types of evidences and how we understand the strength of those evidences. So the Quran, for instance, is unanimously accepted as something that is mutawatir. There are certain recitations of the Quran which are considered shadha, meaning they are rare and they are not part of the mutawatir or the majority recitations that are accepted by the ummah. Those recitations, even though they're recorded, are not accepted as evidence. Okay? You understand? They're not accepted as evidence. And we have in the Sunnah the same concept. There are certain things in the Sunnah that are established not by single reports or single hadith. And even in hadith, we have gradation. We know how to read, how to examine hadith and their veracity. But even in that case, there are certain levels. So you have things that are mutawatir, you have things that are not, and they have to be therefore examined. So we have a system by the fadl of Allah where all these evidences are examined. Ijma' too is a concept too, which has to be explained. A lot of people had this confusion earlier, like certain groups in our, here in North America had made certain decisions that, they didn't agree with others, some other bodies of ulama, and they said, well, isn't it ijma'? Well, no, it's not ijma'. We have to see first what the concept of ijma' is. Okay, ijma', first of all, unanimously, and there are differences too there, what exactly will be ijma'? Unanimously, ijma' would be that there is not a single dissenting voice. So as long as there is a contemporary scholar who says, no, I don't agree with that, there's no ijma'. It doesn't matter who that group or board claims to be. We're the this, we're the that, we're the other thing. That's wonderful, good for you. But you don't hold sway over the entire ummah. And even if there's one dissenting voice of a scholar based on his own evidence and different reasons, then this is not called ijma', right? And it cannot be binding on other people until there is basically a unanimous agreement of all of those contemporary scholars. And that's why some ulama in history have said that either ijma' is very rare, or some have even went so far to claim that it doesn't exist, which is not true. It does exist. It does happen at times, and it has happened historically. But there has been scholars who have said that ijma' as a concept just doesn't exist. When and where do we get a time and place where all the ulama agree on one point? So although that claim is refuted, but it is rare. And what I want you to understand is that a lot of the differences that we have in secondary issues have nothing to do whatsoever with the jama'ah, with the larger group, with following what is safe in that, which we know for certain, in other words. And if it is not known certain it's not known for certain in terms of what is nusus, what is relayed to us. Yeah, okay, I'll answer that question in a second. But the idea here of knowing for sure, okay, where we're getting our information from, again, just even from an academic point of view, a larger report of people or a larger body of people reporting something is always more reliable than a smaller group, okay, or even an individual. And so therefore, what is known always has to be taken over what is assumed, because that's the whole point. What is related by the majority, what is mutawatir, is yaqeen. It is known. What is reported by individuals is only assumed. And there's an assumption that they could be right, but even then there's many qara'in. There are other corroborating evidences that may or may not support their opinion. So we cannot make anything based or make any conclusion based on assumption. إِلَّا اتِّبَاعَ الظَّنِّ. This is something that Allah disparages. When people follow something based on assumption, especially in terms of deen. So when you have ideas about your creator, you have ideas about his commandments that are based on your assumption alone, okay, then this is something that is not appreciated. There are times when assumption is all we have, and that's where fiqh comes in, meaning that we have do our best with the little information we have to make a right conclusion. And for that, we need scholars. We don't need people who have no knowledge whatsoever giving their own opinions, because that's the whole point. It's your own opinion. And a lot of times when I hear people talk about it makes sense to me, or they think something makes sense, or they think they're being rational, having been a person who studied logic, yeah, you're not thinking actually. And unfortunately, even many people who are educated in certain fields, they're not acclimated to even the science of logic. So yani, the word that's used in the Quran for thinking is tafakkur. Tafakkur is not fikra. Fikra is just to think about something in general. Tafakkur is to contemplate. It's not to contemplate, it's also to think yani, about something in a way that there is a concerted effort to follow your thoughts through in what we would call in English the science of logic, to see whether that thought process is correct or not. So it's not arbitrary. A lot of times what you hear people in the message arguing about when they say that doesn't make sense to me, and it's like if you look at how they're thinking, they're not thinking at all. They're simply arriving at that conclusion based on their hawa. Meaning that doesn't make sense to me. What do you mean it doesn't make sense? Meaning you don't like it, or it doesn't feel right to me, like an emotional, it's some kind of emotional based conclusion. And there Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَنْ أَضَلُّ مِمَّنِ اتَّبَعَ هَوَاهُ بِغَيْرِ هُدًى مِنَ اللَّهِ. Who can be more astray than one who follows their desire, meaning their inclinations, their personal likes and dislikes and their inclinations? Who could be more astray than one who follows that without any guidance from Allah? And بِغَيْرِ هُدًى مِنَ اللَّهِ, the word here hudan is nakira, it is general in its most general sense. So any type of guidance. So if you actually used your logic, I'd be happy. But the problem is most of us are not really using logic. Our thought process is not at all logical. We're not actually using certain principles to see whether we are coming to right conclusions or not. So what I'm trying to say is that even there, when we say according to the rationale, the aql too has to be first given a precedence over your desires, because there are many people who are smart but don't allow their intellect to control their inclinations. Okay, this is why you see people doing a lot of the things that they do, even though they may know that the result of their actions is they know it, like logically doesn't make sense if I do this, but they'll do it anyhow. Why? Because their inclinations lead them, their hawa, right? And then they come to conclusions that are even in their own minds they know are false because they're following hawa. So even that, it takes discipline to put the aql and the intellect before, okay, what you do, and not just come to conclusions because it feels good or it sounds good or it's easier, okay, which is what we see a lot of the times. It's easier, so that's what I'll do. I'll follow the easiest of the two choices. I'll follow what's easiest for me. In often cases too, that's the bottom line. We have to understand the nature of our fitna of this time, and this is what it is. To answer the question about Allah saying the majority of people are lost, that has nothing to do here with the jama'ah, because again, the jama'ah here refers to those of the believers, okay? And amongst the believers, the jama'ah, okay, will always be the majority who are sticking to the truth. And that is a promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That doesn't mean that every believer will be acting upon the truth. It means that the protection of the deen and the hifadha of the deen is in following the majority. And even, like I said, if you look at it from an academic point of view, what's more reliable? Apparent views, or something that is obscure and not known, or something that is known by all? And it should be a very obvious answer, just from an academic point of view, that what is known by all is obviously more reliable than certain views that are outside of the mainstream. Okay. And so the majority in this case, it even refers why I kept on referring to concepts like tawakuf. Even just from an academic point of view, the majority will always be more reliable than a minority. Okay. When they are relating the same thing, that's the whole point. That when they are relating and they have reported the same thing over and over and over again, as the example of the Quran, that the same thing has been repeated and relayed over and over and over again. Not if the majority forgets, right? Or if the majority doesn't care or the majority doesn't know. But when they have knowledge of a particular incident or event and they all relate the same thing, then obviously this is the safer path to go. Okay. And so that is one thing. And then to relate that to the ma'ruf later on, how we should enjoin good, it means that again, when we enjoin good and forbid evil, يأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر, that they enjoin good and forbid evil, it also gives us the concept that the idea of morality, what is good and what is bad, should also be premised upon knowledge that is absolute. And okay, so to explain that, if there are certain things that are not based on this type of dalil, that evidence that is indisputable, and they are differences of opinions that are valid because again the evidence is not, it's not indisputable. Okay, the evidence is from me, it's our presumptions at best, then we cannot argue about, nor can we make an issue out of issues like that. Excuse me, make an issue out of things like that that are not based on what we know definitively. Hope, inshallah, everyone's following. I didn't catch the last question. Maybe we can just keep those questions for the end, inshallah, and I'll try to answer them because I didn't catch that one. All right. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ, that remember well the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon you. So important here it is to understand this concept from an aqidah point of view, that any good that we receive from Allah in terms of iman, in terms of deen, in terms of being Muslim, it should be understood as a ni'mah from Allah. And what I mean by that is not just like I said last week, the unfortunate plight of many Muslims today is we do not see our deen even as a ni'mah, rather we see it as a burden. That's another issue in itself, which is a very scary sign. But this issue, what I mean is that you are not Muslim because of your own efforts. You have iman because of the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? You have to keep that in mind. It is ni'mat Allah that we are asked to we are reminded of. It is not, remember how you, right, chose the path of guidance. Remember how you, whatever case you want to put out, whatever you want to say after that, the word is not yours or you. It is not used and referring us to us in the second, in the second person. That it's not about that. It's about Allah. وَاذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ. Remind yourselves of the blessing of Allah upon you. If anything about you, it is that you are blessed by Allah, that you have been given iman. And when you were given iman, it was in a state, إِذْ كُنْتُمْ أَعْدَاءً, that you are enemies to one another. فَأَلَّفَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِكُمْ. And then Allah, again, not you, but Allah is the one, by giving you iman, by blessing you with the nur of iman, He brought your hearts together. So again, it is something that shows togetherness. The same emphasis is placed here. Ulf. Ulf is unity, is mutual love. It is to be together. That the emphasis here is that when iman, in other words, is given to a people, then the sign of that is that Allah brings their hearts together. If there's tafarruq, then the sign of that is misguidance. Okay. When there's tafarruq, when there is division, to the point that, again, this is not division, and I keep on reiterating it, fiqh, and I hope you're catching what I'm saying, and differences of opinion there are based on things that are dhanni. They are not definitive. But as far as iman in Allah, and the belief in Allah, and certain issues of aqidah that have to be premised on an adillat al-yaqiniyya, that they have to be evidences that give us certainty that we know to be true. Okay, there, when everyone has accepted one and the same thing, Allah has blessed us to be able to see the truth, and we all agree on one and the same thing, you will find naturally unity. There's no differences here. as opposed to the other people that disunity, which we were commanded not to do. Here, right? وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا is because they could not agree on what is true. They could not agree on what they believed in. They could not agree on what is that habal, what is that thing that Allah has given us, that deen, the truth that was given by Allah. What is it? They don't agree upon that, so then their hearts are not together. So the sign that Allah has given a people Iman and guided them to the truth is that He has also brought their hearts together. وَأَلَّفَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِكُمْ. And then from that, فَأَصْبَحْتُمْ بِنِعْمَتِهِ. And so by that blessing that He's given you through Iman, through the truth, and bringing your hearts together, you have become ikhwanan. You become brothers to such an extent that brothers will always be there for each other. In the case of the Sahaba, it was even beyond it. وَيُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ. They preferred others above themselves, even if they couldn't take care of their own needs. And what was their state before that? وَكُنْتُمْ عَلَىٰ شَفَا حُفْرَةٍ مِّنَ النَّارِ. That you were literally in a pit, مِنَ النَّارِ, not in the actual hellfire, but as if you were in a piece of the hellfire. Yani here on earth. So some have said, like even the state, in other words, that you were in, the condition that you were in, it is akin or alike being in hell here on earth. But what is that condition? That was be the what condition would be there that would create hell on earth for people? Division, and division that leads to hatred, and hatred that leads to killing each other, to violence, right? And all of the things that are implied by that. And that is literally like a pit of hell. So division, mutual hatred, right? Those conditions, if that's our condition, we have to understand two things. It must mean that there is misguidance, because the truth does not lead to division, it leads to unity. And it also means that we are in a state that is similar to the state of the people of hell. It's like being in a type of Jahannam here on earth, even before the Jahannam of the Akhirah comes before our eyes. May Allah protect us. So you want a state of the people of the garden, then that state is a state of mutual love and ulfa, right? وَأَلَّفَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِكُمْ, that He brings your hearts together in love and in unity. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ said, Al-mu'minu ma'lafun, that the believer is the source of ulfa, meaning that the believer in their nature is the source of unity. That people, they can be around people and people can be around them, right? That with Iman, the believer is the source of unity. If a believer finds themselves in a state where they are the source of all the fitan and the troubles and disunity, they might want to ask a certain few questions about our own state based on these ayat and many other hadith. Why is it that we find ourselves causing division? There must be something wrong here. Okay, so then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then reminds and says, فَأَنْقَذَكُمْ مِنْهَا, that we extracted you from that pit of hell. وَكَذَلِكَ يُبَيِّنُ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ آيَاتِهِ. So like that, we will explain our signs, meaning exactly this. What is the explanation, clear explanation of these signs? The majority, the group, when they are given that the truth, they all agree upon it, and then they deliver it, and that the sign of that truth is exactly that it is, first of all, that they are not divided. They all can agree on one and the same thing. Second of all, that their hearts are together because of that unity, and they do not divide themselves. And that is a blessing from Allah. He explains it to you so that you can do what? لَعَلَّكُمْ تَهْتَدُونَ, so that you be guided to know, number one, that is only by the mercy and the ni'mah and the blessing of Allah that happens. And number two, what are the signs when that happens? The signs are that you are not divided. The signs are that you can all agree on at least certain principles, that the main principles. Remember, this is important. The main principles are exactly that, your aqidah, what you believe in, and those things you will never divide upon. And that also means that in the secondary principles, even though you may not always agree, they do not become a point of division. They do not become a point of division or divisiveness. Rather, that they are understood to be outside of the realm of those things which the jama'ah, which everyone agrees upon. And so therefore there is room to have, as an example, ijtihad. Okay. Okay, so that's inshallah bi'ithnillah, that part of the ayah, or this ayah in particular. Um, I hope that inshallah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps us understand these things so that we can make a greater effort to understand the difference between what we agree upon, what is definite and understood in our deen as definitive, and what is not, and to not argue about those things which are not definitive, and to be united upon things which we know are true, and to keep ourselves united in that way with love and mutual understanding, and then not to be divisive. If anyone does that, then it is a sign that they are in this state, right? وَكُنْتُمْ عَلَى شَفَا حُفْرَةٍ مِّنَ النَّارِ. It's like being in a piece of Jahannam here on earth, right? Here on earth, that when we cause these divisions and these troubles and these problems. And if you, this, which brings up the next point, that in this ayah, وَلْتَكُمْ أُمَّةٌ يَدْعُونَ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ, there must be from amongst you a group who calls towards the good. Of course, there are some issues about this ayah in terms of how it's understood, meaning the amr is there, waltakun, which is a command. It's a command, a verbal command form. So it is literally like an order. There must be. So that it infers from what we can infer from that is that it is a commandment. It's wajib. It must be. It is a faridah. Right? That is something we must do. What must you do? There must be a group who calls towards good and calls towards good and enjoying what is right, and forbids what is evil. So some say minkum here in the Arabic is tab'id, which would mean that there has to be a group from amongst you, which would mean that it is not an obligation on every Muslim, but there must be a group called kifaya, at least a group of Muslims who engage in this work of calling people towards Allah and enjoining the good and forbidding the evil. But some ulama also say that minkum here is actually tabyin, which means kunu ummatan, that you got you. In other words, it would be, look, you should become the ummah, all of you guys, right? So you guys are the ones. Minkum meaning that you are the ones. Yani kunu ummatan yad'una ila al-khair. So that's also, some interpretations have been rendered as that it means not just that it's fard kifaya, but rather it is the obligation of every Muslim. Okay, that every Muslim must engage in and be part of inviting towards good and enjoining evil. The Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said by Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu, إن الناس إذا رأوا الظالم فلم يأخذوا على يده أوشك أن يعمهم الله بالعقاب. That indeed, if people witness oppression being done and do not stop that oppression, it may be that Allah will include all of them in His punishment. Now, this is a subject that is far too vast for me to start at this point. And even what we see today, right? And what we've seen in the past, not just today, but in the past, of punishment and certain hardships and trials engulfing mankind in every type of form, then we have to also ask ourselves that, of course, there is always a cause for this. There's always a reason that Allah does what He does. Just because He can do whatever He wants does not mean that His actions are bereft of hikmah, as they say, that there is a hikmah to all of it. So, we understand from hadith like this that because we have not enjoined the good and forbidden the evil, then these things happen. We also know that لا تظهر الفاحشة في قوم, that never does indecency and immoral behavior become apparent in the people. So the word keyword here is apparent, meaning it's not done in secret. This is not something that is done by a few people behind closed doors. This now becomes what's in vogue. It's done openly. Okay. Never does it happen except those people will be afflicted by a disease that their forefathers have never heard of before. Novel coronavirus. What does novel mean? We've never seen it before. So if you don't believe it, it's the words of the Prophet ﷺ. It's very clear. And he gave the clear reasoning that the fahisha, immorality, particularly in regards to sexual matters, frankly speaking, becomes so widespread, not widespread, but it becomes apparent. Apparent means it's done in the open. We've gotten to the point, and I've tried to warn so many people in so many of our halaqat, we've gotten to the point where Muslim organizations and people, speakers, have now promoted that lifestyle of fahisha. And you know what I'm talking about. We've promoted it in public. We've said that we now have to be their supporters. We have to accept them. And we even participated, some of us, in their parades and everything else. And so when things like this happen, we say, oh, we can't go to the masjid and pray Tarawih. Well, subhanAllah, I mean, can we say anything other than perhaps all of this is because of the mistakes we are making, right? The mistakes we are making lead to these kinds of things. And so we have to really consider these things now. That I'm not trying to be harsh, because I've said these things as nicely as I can many times. Reconsider now in this time, right? Including in making dua that Allah lifts us out of this condition, because being with the Jama'ah also means that it is imperative for us to be together as a people. The masjid was the first thing that the Prophet ﷺ built when he came to Al-Madinah to Munawwara, because it's a place of ibadah, and also it's a place of Jama'ah, where we bring the people together. All of the blessings we have in this deen, for the most part, yes, there is individual ibadah, but we do it collectively. We are a people whom do things collectively. This is why another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said that the shaitan is like a wolf who preys on the lone sheep. So in order to not be preyed upon by shaitan, you have to be with a group. You have to be with other Muslims, right? It's just the way it is, whether we like it or not. This is now deprived of that, because perhaps as a group, we weren't doing our job. Our job was to be this ummah. That we were supposed to be the people who invites people towards the good, that understands well morality. We know what morality is. At least we should, right? And that's the problem now, is we're even questioning that. This is related in hadith that Ali anhu is the narrator. It's considered weak by some, but he actually mentioned this, that the Prophet ﷺ said the time will come when this ummah will not only forget enjoining good and forbidding evil, that we will enjoin the evil and forbid the good. Now, I ask you again, considering the other hadith I said about fahisha, spreading, it being open everywhere, have we not done that? Because I'm just being honest. Like I said, there are Muslim groups, Muslim people who represent Islam in the public sphere who have supported the munkar openly, okay? That the time will come and that's what we will do. We will now, morality will be turned upside down, and we will also be there to help. And then when things like that happen, right, or that if perhaps at that time Allah will punish everybody. Why? Because we have allowed things to get to that point, okay? Couldn't it be at least that some of these Muslim organizations should be like, alhamdulillah, in Pittsburgh that happened. Certain speakers were asked to come that have that stance, and they said, no, we're not going to do that. Good. May Allah accept. All right. But shouldn't we have been responsible enough that people can have that opinion, but let them be the minority opinion? Let them not be representing Islam or Muslims in the public. We as Muslims, as a group, as a Jama'ah, are very clear about what we are, about who we are, and what we believe, and what we stand for in terms of morality. Al-amru bil ma'ruf wa nahyu anil munkar. When we stop doing that, then is it of no surprise that these kinds of things happen? We ask Allah for afiyah. We ask Allah to give us afiyah, and to protect us from these types of diseases and wars and troubles. But if they are happening, I don't think any of us should be questioning why it's happening, because it's very obvious, right? Where we have gone from this to that, right? From the directive of the Quran to be united on what you are, to understand what you are, be united about what you are, and be that group who will now invite other people to the khair and the good that you have, to the morality that you have, that you understand well, and that you should understand well, and that you are able to go out and call people towards good, and invite and prevent them from evil, even if it's just yad'una ila al-khair. Now, of course, to enjoin good and forbid evil, also there's an explanation of that not everyone has the capacity, but at least at a very basic level, which is what? As Muslims, as a group, we all can agree on certain principles, certain basic necessary principles, in terms of our aqidah, in terms of what we believe, and in terms of our morality. Things like that. Something is fahisha. The word in Arabic itself implies an immoral act that it is known to everyone. Okay, that everyone can make sense out of it that it's wrong. Now we're living in an age where people don't have sense. And the only thing that makes something good or bad is whether I can do it or not. In other words, again, ittiba' al-hawa. You're following your desires. That's the only thing that marks something good or bad. They're not using any other standard. And, you know, they just say that if it's something that can be done, then it should be done. If I want to become a woman tomorrow, no questions, right? If I feel like it, literally, however, if I wake up in the morning, now I want to be a female. So now you're allowed to do it. There you go. That's the world we live in. We should be a people who don't fall in line with that. That our teachings were very clear and there was no ambiguity whatsoever in any of it. So when we are asked, we don't have to be, if you're so scared of other people and what they think of you, you don't have to insult people. You can explain things intelligently. We can also even have classes about that. How do you explain things in a way that you don't compromise your own position, at the same time you don't put yourself in another situation that perhaps would be also dangerous for you. There's ways of doing it, but never in any instant should we be in accepting that people in our community now will compromise what is known for the sake of whatever, it's political expediency or anything else. Because when that happens and none of us are there to speak out and tell the truth and bring the truth to the people, then things like this happening, no surprise whatsoever, right? It's actually only to be expected. So we should make tawbah also. I'm a heartfelt request to all of us that if up until now we have not been clear about these things and afraid to speak about these things, then we should make tawbah. Okay, we're reading tubu ilallahi tawbatan nasuha, that be sincere and make tawbah that, Ya Allah, you gave me this ni'mah, which is iman, which is the truth, which is a firm moral understanding of what is right and what is wrong. And I should have appreciated it, as tough as it may be in this day and age where this is not the in vogue thing. Okay, but ask yourselves, since when was it ever in vogue? You know, in the Bible, what it says, that every prophet was rejected by their own people. Okay, the truth was never much in vogue for the most part. Okay, so don't feel that now we're seeing. It's so funny, and I think that what happens is, like, you know, we were so happy with the status quo that we have achieved as Muslims in North America, meaning most of us are well off, we're living a pretty comfortable life. Now all of a sudden Allah sends something to us, and no matter how well off or comfortable you may be, you're scared. Just think about that for a moment, right? Perhaps maybe if we just for a second thought to ourselves that, you know, a little bit of courage for the sake of Allah, okay? If someone taunting you makes you uncomfortable, now you're in a situation where an unseen dead, it's not even living, it's a virus, right? And that's all from Allah. You're so scared of it, you can't even go outside. Allah. But before, what we were worried about is what people are going to think of us. And we all of us make tawbah. That's really irrelevant, right? When people themselves are scared of an unseen, something is not even living. What are they to be scared of? No, so we need to be firm, because in that firmness, whether people believe it or not, is protection from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? It is, as Allah says, أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ, the ones who will stand up and do that, who call people towards good and who forbid evil and or join good and forbid evil. They are the ones who will be successful. They are the ones whom Allah will ultimately facilitate success. And if you look again at the Anbiya as your examples, then in every situation, every predicament, they would always come out on top. This is what Allah has determined, that me and my prophets, we will always overcome. We will always overcome. There's no question about who will win. It's only a matter of time. But perhaps we have somewhat lost our way in these regards, right? We don't understand these concepts of the majority, for instance, even from an academic point of view, like what kind of evidence we know for certain, what kind of things we all can agree upon, and also from a spiritual perspective, that unity is a sign that Allah has guided you by His ni'mah, by His favor and His blessing upon you to the truth. And this unity and tafarruq is a sign of the opposite, And not only is it a sign of the opposite, but its state, spiritually speaking, is like, right, إِذْ كُنْتُمْ, when you were on, where you were literally inside a pit of hell, meaning even in this world, your state, spiritually speaking, this unity and arguing, bickering, we have become so used to that it's like some of us like it. We thrive on it. Who in the world would thrive on being in a state that's akin to being in hell? That we're so miserable that we always have to fight. We always have to start arguments. We always have to have a problem. No, that's not the people of Jannah. What is the people of Jannah? And salam and salama. It's the exact opposite. وَنَزَعْنَا مِن صُدُورِهِمْ, وَنَزَعْنَا, Allah Ta'ala will remove all of the ill feelings that people had towards each other from their hearts before they get into Jannah. Meaning when you're in Jannah, there's no place for that. That's not the state of the people of the garden. The state of the garden is mutual love, unity, as if, as the Prophet ﷺ said, كَأَنَّهُمْ رَجُلٌ وَاحِدٌ, as if they are just one person, one whole body together. Not different individuals everywhere running around arguing with each other and starting fights at any chance they get, having, I don't agree with that, who cares? And even then when I hear a lot of that, I don't agree with that, and you sit there and and you think about their thought process, you realize they don't have a thought process. You don't like it, so you feel that it's your right to say, I don't agree with it. And why don't you like it? Is there a premise for it? You get what I'm saying? Do you really know the Sharia well enough that you know the difference between what's mutawatir, what is khabarul wahid? Right? No, you don't. So you're not basing it on Sharia. Do you know logic enough to understand the thought processes of things like a syllogism, or like how do you arrive to a conclusion that is proper or not? No, you don't. So what does that mean? I think is based on your desires. You understand? I'm trying to make us disciplined here. If you want to make a conclusion, be disciplined about it. And when you're following your desires, then the point after that is only disunity. And it is like being in the middle of hell. Because how do people get into hell anyhow? Ittiba' dhan, obeying or following. Ittiba' also has an implication of obeying, following their presumptions, not really having knowledge about the subject or what's right or what's wrong. They just follow their presumptions. The other, ittiba' al-hawa, following their inclinations without guidance, bighayri hudan min Allah, without having been guided by Allah. So it's not the fact that you have your inclinations, that's fine. You can be into whatever you're into, mashallah. But it's the fact that if you let those things guide you without guidance, without truth, without knowledge, then that is absolutely destruction, and it leads only to one thing, and not to the unity that happens when we follow the truth. When Allah blesses us to see the truth, recognize it, and follow it, that is a unity we find, and in unity, that is like the state of the people of Jannah. The disunity, the tafarruq, is like the state of the people of hell. There should be no reason why any Muslim in their right mind should ever want to be in that state, either in this world or in the hereafter. Right? So please, for the sake of Allah, in this month of rahmah and forgiveness, make tawbah if perhaps we have not been those people who have been clear about the truth. Maybe we haven't even been those people who really understood the truth. Yeah, we're Muslim, mashallah, but we do actually learn these things detailed to where we know how to differentiate the different categories of evidences from the Sharia and even from the logical point of view, right? So that we know what things we all agree upon, and those are the things that are the principles that we are clear about to ourselves and to the whole world. Okay, and where are the things where, yes, mashallah, we can agree to disagree and live our lives and go on without any fighting and bickering. That in itself is part of what causes the problems, but also because of that, we have not been, because of this reason too, we have not been people who have been open with the truth. Now, all of a sudden, we find ourselves in certain situations. We can only not be, we shouldn't be surprised about it. We should ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us and the ummah, and to bring the truth back to us in such a state that the ummah unites, forgets all of their other problems, and becomes true exemplars. True exemplars for mankind of what is morality, what is truth. Even if other people don't like it, it doesn't matter, right? Because Allah will protect those people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bless those people. أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. They are truly those people who have succeeded and are successful in life, if they are of that category. So may Allah forgive us. May Allah ta'ala give us mercy in this time. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala unite our hearts and give us the truth by His ni'mah and His favor and His blessings. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Also forgive me if I maybe sounded a little harsh, but it's just because a lot of these things, I've been thinking about, and I'm not the only one. There are plenty of hadith and ulama out there who recognize the same thing. Whatever masa'ib are happening to us, unfortunately, we can't just say they are trials. We can also say that a part of it is because of where we have gone as an ummah. Right? So it's a wake-up call. And that's why we need all of us to make tawbah. And we have to be very careful in the future now, from this point on, that, what steps we take, be cautious, and from whom we support and what groups we say that we're going to support. If they are not groups that are supporting the majority view and that are clear about the issues of morality, then I would say don't be around. So whatever it is they want to propagate, whatever it is that they are trying to do, you don't have to fight anyone or can be, abrasive, but you don't have to be around to support it either, at the very least, right? And then you should be very clear about what it is that our deen teaches, and for that too, you have to learn. So that's the other thing I always try to tell people: learn everything that you need to learn. Learn the differences between these evidences. Learn the differences between what is acceptable difference and what is not. Learn to understand where the jama'ah is, where is ijma', where are those things that we all must agree upon. And note, it is fitting to say that the majority of the things that we must agree upon that are definitive, yaqeeniyah, are usually in the aspects of our aqidah and iman, which is befitting, because the iman that was taught since the time of Adam alayhi salam all the way to the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, those concepts, those truths do not change, because the truth is not subjective. Whereas law can be subjective, truth cannot. So I'll leave it at that, inshallah. So if there's any questions, we can start from now, inshallah.
So brother, there is a question in the chat window. Can you answer that?
Okay, let me see first.
Yeah, can ijma on an issue changes with the time, like there was a consensus on not building Christian churches on Muslim lands?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, there's no ijma that changes because of time, especially if something that is, well, let's put it this way: like ijma is something that it has to be an issue that was never, it's unprecedented. Okay, so once the issue comes up and there's ijma, then there's no ijma after that. Does it make sense? Ijma can only be for things that are unprecedented. They didn't happen before. So once it's occurred and then there's ijma, you don't they circumvent that.
So
And I can look and see if there's any scholars that have claimed that. From my knowledge, no, but I can definitely go back to the books and find out, inshallah.
So are you saying like when it's done, it's done? Like it's like done. Nobody can change it.
Yes, exactly, because
even if we see like there was a kind of mistake done, or something was not good, or something was like may need to reevaluate or something.
But that's the whole point. Maybe we can do a class about that. Ijma, according to us, the reason we say ijma is not just as a consensus. There's actually divine ordinance there, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given ijma that kind of status, that when the believers agree on something, right? And what the believers here too has to be explained. We're not saying every believer, every Muslim. We're talking about the scholars, obviously. And even there is a difference of opinion there too. What generation, actually? A lot of the Hanafi ulama say that the ijma is there in the Khairul Qurun, amongst the Sahaba and the Tabi'een. That's another issue, and some scholars have said that. So this actually should be another class then. But in general, yes, ijma is not considered to be like something that we review. Okay, it's something that once it's done, it's done. Okay, because it's not just the fact that scholars have agreed, right? Yeah. So I saw that comment. So it's not just that scholars agreed upon something, it's the fact that we say that, look, commandments like what is halal and what is haram can only be the prerogative of Allah. So who speaks on behalf of Allah? Then that also has to be determined by Allah. So either the messenger himself, right, ati Allah wa ati Rasul, or also غير سبيل المؤمنين, and also the majority here, meaning this is the concept where ijma is taken from, that if a majority of scholars or the believers agree on something, we don't say that it's just because they have agreed. We say that this has come actually as a divine ordinance, meaning this is from Allah Himself. All right, you understand what I'm saying? So it doesn't become subjective if you take that. All right, so I can look and see that if there's any opinions that ijma now becomes mansukh, but I don't think that that's something. I'll look and I'll just double check on that, but I don't believe that's something that's there. Right?
Okay. Yeah, I don't see any other question on the chat window. If anyone has any question, please write in the chat window. Otherwise, I'm gonna give everyone a chance to speak up. I'm gonna unmute all of you. So if you don't want to speak, just mute yourself. So I'm gonna unmute. Yeah, I mean, if anyone has any question, please go ahead and speak up. Otherwise, mute yourself.
Assalamualaikum, brother. This is Yavar. Did we answer the question from Mudassir Ali that you pasted in the chat?
What was the question again?
The question was pasted in the chat, brother. That
Yeah, that was answered, Yavar. But anyway, I mean, I'll let.
Yeah, I believe I did. I believe I did. Was it about the majority? Like there's
yes,
an ayat where Allah says the majority of people don't know. All right. Here the Jama'ah is referring to the believers, but even then, maybe I should actually say that there is some evidence that the majority is not just any group of believers in any time. It has to do first and foremost with the first generations, khairul qurun, as the Prophet himself said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the best of generations, the companions, their followers, and their followers. So sometimes in later generations, it's not like what we say by Jama'ah is that all the Muslims, the billion something Muslims across the world, that all of them are right. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that when it comes to the deen, in other words, what is our aqidah and what are things we know to be true, we have to base that on the majority of related to what I said about mutawatir, okay? What is known by the majority of the companions, what is known by the majority of those generations, those will be the things that we call truths. In other words, this is what the Prophet ﷺ said or did or brought. This is the Quran. It's based on a majority. The recitations of the Quran is based on the majority. It's tawatur. Does that make sense? You understand?
yes,
Not
brother.
that like now 1 billion Muslims across the world who, like, no offense, we have no idea what's going on. Like they now make the Jama'at. That's not necessarily the case. Okay? I mean, I'm just being frank. If we were to statistically try to break down how many Muslims even pray 5 times a day in the Muslim world, what would we say? You think it's the majority?
2%.
Right.
No.
No, I mean, really, I've seen it with my own eyes. You go to the Muslim world and you'll see that it's very low percentage of people even pray 5 times a day. So it's like, how you can't include that in the Jama'ah. That's not the Jama'ah that's being referred to here. The group that's being referred to here is when we receive knowledge of our deen, okay? In other words, what we say definitively is deen, what we believe about Allah, what we believe about the akhirah, and all these details that we should know in our aqidah, then that should be based on the majority, okay? Meaning from that time, from the time of the Prophet ﷺ and the generation after and the generation after, okay? Allahu A'lam.
Imam, I'm going to ask a question that's a little bit unrelated, may open up a can of worms, but there's a prominent scholar on YouTube, you know him, who is claiming that the coronavirus right now, this pandemic, is a tool or an agent of Dajjal.
Yeah, I know. MashaAllah. Yeah, I know. I've caught a couple of his videos. Yeah,
what's your take on that? And maybe just from an Aqidah standpoint, is Dajjal, Shaitan does not have, and correct me if I'm wrong, have the ability to physically cause harm, or is that untrue, as opposed to the jaw that can actually manipulate the physical world? Can you comment a little bit on that?
Well, yeah. Well, see, wow. This is going to take some time. Because interesting discussion. You know, you have the ayah where Ayub alayhi salam told Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that shaitan has touched him, referring to his illness. And also there's hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said that the ta'un, the plague, is also from the shayateen, from the jinn. So there is a concept that severe diseases and sicknesses like this are a result of an attack of the shayateen. And now, of course, what we mean by that is that, yeah, the shaitan can at times cause physical harm to people by the permission of Allah. Right? So when Allah permits and allows by His will certain people to be harmed by it, they will be harmed. However, we know in our Aqidah that shaitan and everything else is the creation of Allah, and they cannot do anything outside independently of Allah's will. Okay? But why do we then relate it to shaitan? Is that certain illnesses are a result of some type of evil. So he's right about that in that perspective, that sometimes some illnesses are a result of some type of evil in the world. I personally believe that also the coronavirus has kind of a very, it looks to me there's something about it that's shaitani in essence. But I mean, that doesn't exclude the fact that it's from Allah anyhow. He permitted it to happen for whatever reason. There's also certain hadith, which is I would like to discuss with us at a certain time too, about the last days, that mention certain things like this, that I think also the reason why Allah has allowed this to happen is of certain indications in certain hadith that we are coming to another stage in human existence, and generational difference now between what we have just lived in, which what they called, you know, frankly speaking, what we, the New World Order, one world government, one world economy, all of that, that's coming to an end. That's part of why Allah knows best that this has happened. Because as you can see already in politics and economics, this is going to change things. Okay? You understand? So there's another generation coming now. There's another stage that's going to happen after this. And that's why I try to emphasize indirectly in many of our gatherings, like what we need to do as a people too, is as communities, we need to really be together more, because at this next stage, we're going to find that the world is not going to be the way it was before. Like this whole, what we've enjoyed to a certain degree, but of course it has its own setbacks of that type of world economy and the kind of traveling that we used to do. A lot of that is not going to be the same anymore. Okay. We're not going to see that much anymore. So we have to have smaller groups of interconnected communities and families, basically, is what's going. And eventually when the time comes, when Dajjal comes, the Prophet ﷺ said only two people will be saved in that time, either on the forefront of the battle, fighting Dajjal directly, or you're out in the mountains, literally, with your goat and your sheep and your family.
You know, Imam, it's interesting you mentioned that, because this you know, sheikh or scholar is also a big proponent of that, the lack of reliance on government. And now, you know, he talks a lot about setting up communities, whether they're with Muslims and things like that. But just to take a step back, because maybe I'm misunderstanding. So, you know, shaitan obviously whispers things to us and influences us on, you know, a desire level. But if, for example, if he has the ability to impose an illness on you, and Allah's permitting that, why wouldn't that illness just come directly from Allah? That to me is a little bit confusing.
It does. I mean, everything is from Allah. But it's also interesting that in part of the reason why Ayub alayhi salam said that it was shaitan that touched him, right? And also, if you look at Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he was giving da'wah to his people, and he said, إِذَا مَرِضْتُ فَيَشْفِينِي. He said that when I become ill, Allah cures me. The interesting thing here is in the way he said it. He didn't say Allah made me sick. Okay, you understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Even though everything's from Allah. So it's like out of adab that we don't attribute bad things to the Creator. We attribute only good. Okay, So
is it safe to say if anything bad happens to us, you know, is it right then to say, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem"? You know what I mean? Like, meaning anything that's happening bad, ask Allah to protect us from shaitan, meaning that anything bad ultimately is coming from him?
well, yeah, the adab is that the aqidah is this. The aqidah is, we know everything is from Allah, good or bad. But the adab, meaning how we express it, should always be that if something bad happens, we either attribute it to ourselves, or we can also say, for instance, in this case, like, not in this case, but in some cases, shaitan, okay? Knowing that everything's from Allah. But out of adab, we express it as being something that, in other words, we brought on ourselves because of our own faults. And that because of that, shaitan was allowed to, or is given permission, if you will. He was allowed to cause this kind of harm to us because of our own actions, right? That we met this setback, or we have this problem, or it's all because, and so even though, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, that whatever befalls you, it's because of what you, it's because of you, right? But then also he says, for in Allah, for a minute, excuse me, that whatever happens is also from Allah. So there's no contradiction. The contradiction is that the Aqidah tells us always that everything is from Allah. However, there's always a connection between what Allah gives and the means by which Allah gives it. In other words, if it's bad, it's coming through something that's bad as well. Okay? The recompense of evil is evil like it. Okay? So Allah created it, Allah is the one who controls it, but he brings it about because of something else equivalent to it, or because of something that is bad in nature as well. So maybe from shaitan, it may be from our own sins and faults. It really doesn't matter. It's Allah who gives it, but it's the result of it. And you talk about cause and effect, even in the natural world, right? So something is the result of something else that is like it. Correct? You understand?
Yes.
That's why in Arabic, even, it's interesting that the same word we use for cause, illa, is the same word they also use for illnesses and sicknesses, illa, right? So there's a means. That means creates something else like it creates it, like in this case, like a virus creates a sickness, right? So so that's all because Allah, He has created it, but it comes through the means which is appropriate for it. So if evil comes, it comes usually from what? An evil source. Correct or not?
Correct.
Right. So yeah, and I agree with him. By the way, I know exactly the video that I watched it myself. I agree with him only on that point. I think that personally, we need to be taking smaller steps to make our communities more, and like he suggested. You don't have to be extreme about it, but definitely we need to be thinking about how to be, tighter knit community, tighter knit families that can kind of rely on each other. Okay, you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Allah knows best. Okay, I'm sorry.
All right. Any other questions from anyone? All right. I think, thank you so much for everyone. Thank you, Brother Dickinson. Jazakumullah khair. I'm going to end the meeting now. Thank you.
Okay, done. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Wa alaikum assalam.